Dealerships across the country started receiving calls from angry customers. Brand new Silverado and Tahoe owners stranded on highways. Oil lights flashing, engines seizing, tow trucks lined up outside service bays that couldn't keep up. Some engines didn't even make it to their first oil change. Inside General Motors, panic was spreading quietly. The powertrain division in Pontiac had spent years perfecting this design, an all-aluminum V8, the most advanced in GM history. But what they didn't anticipate was that the same innovations meant to save fuel were now destroying the engine from within. In the testing rooms, engineers were seeing it firsthand, oil pressure dropping to zero in less than 30 seconds, bearings melted, crankshafts scorched. Entire blocks ruined beyond repair. They raised alarms, they wrote memos, but upper management had other priorities: production targets, marketing schedules, and Wall Street. Stopping the line was not an option. One engineer later described it as watching a slow magmation train wreck. Another said, "We built an engine too perfect on paper to survive in the real world." As failures mounted, GM's response was silence. Service bulletins were rewritten. Dealers were told to reassure customers and blame maintenance habits. Internally, engineers were ordered not to discuss the failures outside of controlled channels. The company's official stance? Isolated incidents. The unofficial reality? Hundreds of engines collapsing across the country. Then came the leak. A confidential email surfaced online, an internal report documenting 47 critical failures during early testing. The memo warned of a systemic lubrication failure and called the new V8 a high-risk architecture under sustained load. The report spread through car forums, and soon YouTube channels began picking up the story. One video, showing a completely destroyed GM V8 after just 1,200 miles, racked up over 2 million views. Public pressure exploded. Lawsuits followed. Dealers in Texas and Michigan started refusing new stock until GM provided answers. Behind closed doors, executives debated desperate options: redesign the engine, delay production, or quietly shift focus toward electrification. The so-called Phoenix Plan. But for thousands of truck owners, it was already too late. Their engines were gone, their trusts shattered. And for the engineers who had warned about it all along, it was more than just a technical failure. It was a moral one. It's a story about corporate denial, about how numbers on a spreadsheet can override common sense, and how a company that once defined American toughness nearly lost its soul chasing efficiency. In this video, we uncover the hidden story behind the GM V8 crisis. The internal warnings, the cover-ups, the fallout, and the moment the heart of the American truck stopped beating. In the spring of 2019, General Motors unveiled what it called the most advanced small EV8 ever built. It was supposed to be the beating heart of a new generation of Silverado and Tahoe models. Lighter, cleaner, and more efficient, yet just as strong as the iron engines that had powered America's working class for decades. The marketing campaign was relentless. Slick commercials of trucks tearing through deserts, engines roaring under the slogan, "Built for the next century of power." Inside GM, executives were confident they had created not just a new motor, but a new legacy. Engineers in Pontiac Powertrain were quietly proud too. The new V8, known internally as Project Atlas, represented years of development and tens of millions of dollars in R&D. Its aluminum block was 25% lighter than the outgoing generation, with redesigned oil channels, friction-reducing coatings, and a new high-efficiency lubrication system meant to satisfy tightening emissions and fuel economy standards. It was faster than the flat oak construction. The carbon fiber, wound in optic plushes, satisfied public standards and changed the chrome finish. For GM, this engine was more than a mechanical upgrade. It was a statement of survival. The company was still recovering from years of financial pressure and public skepticism following its bankruptcy a decade earlier. The Silverado in particular was its lifeline against Ford's F-Series and Ram's growing market share. A new, efficient V8, was the key to winning back both consumers and investors. Failure wasn't just undesirable, it was unthinkable. So when early test vehicles in Arizona and Nevada began returning with fluctuating oil pressure readings, GM's management framed them as sensor calibration issues. The engines kept running, the assembly lines kept moving. Behind closed doors, however, engineers began referring to the problem as the heartbeat glitch. According to one former employee, GM had already replaced at least a dozen pre-production engines after they seized during durability tests, but official reports classified them as non-representative prototypes. In a world dominated by quarterly results and investor confidence, every issue became a matter of perception. We considered issues a matter of perception. By the time the first trucks rolled into dealerships, GM was confident the risk was under control. But in truth, no one knew how the new oiling system would behave after thousands of real-world miles. The design relied on ultra-thin 0W20 oil and minimal bearing clearances to reduce drag. On paper, it worked beautifully. In practice, small variations in manufacturing or oil contamination could create microscopic hotspots that cascaded into catastrophic failure. Engineers knew this, some even kept their own logbooks of early customer complaints, but such concerns never reached the marketing department. For buyers, the launch felt like a return to form. Orders flooded in. Silverado sales surged during the first quarter of 2020. Yet in rural Texas, a dealer mechanic named Rick Thompson began to notice a pattern. Brand new trucks were coming back with metallic glitter in the oil, the telltale sign of bearing wear. In 3 months, he replaced 5 engines, all under 5,000 miles. When he reported it through official channels, the regional GM representative told him to monitor the situation and avoid speculation. A month later, 2 more engines failed within days of each other. Inside GM, whispers began circulating. Engineers in Pontiac joked bitterly that the new V8 ran clean, right up until it didn't run at all. But officially, the company pushed forward, celebrating awards and posting record profits. Few outside the test facilities knew that the next century of power had already begun showing cracks in its foundation. What had started as a bold step into the future was slowly revealing itself as the first act of a crisis that would shake GM to its core. At first, these cases seemed isolated. GM's warranty system handled them quietly, authorizing replacements without much noise. But inside the company's powertrain division in Pontiac, engineers were starting to connect the dots. One internal incident report, later leaked to automotive journalists, listed 7 catastrophic engine failures within the same month, all with similar symptoms: oil starvation at moderate load and bearing seizure near cylinder number 4. The affected engines came from different factories, different assembly lines, even different batches of components. This wasn't a bad supplier part or a single production glitch. It was something deeper, built into the very architecture of the engine itself. Out in the field, the situation was getting worse. Dealerships in Texas, Arizona, and Michigan began seeing engines fail at an alarming rate. One service manager recalled replacing 3 engines in a single week, all under 10,000 miles. The official guidance from GM was to treat each case as an isolated warranty issue and to avoid using the word recall. But word spreads fast, especially in the truck community. Owners started posting pictures of destroyed engine components on online forums, with titles like "New Silverado engine dead at 1,700 miles." Independent mechanics dissected the failures on YouTube, showing viewers the damage up close. Blue-tinted rods, spun bearings, oil channels clogged with metallic debris. Within weeks, these videos were getting hundreds of thousands of views. Behind the scenes, engineers were struggling to contain what was quickly turning into a full-blown crisis. Some suggested a stop sale order until the root cause could be confirmed, but higher-ups feared the financial impact would be devastating. Production targets were already set, and marketing campaigns were locked in for the holiday season. A stop sale wasn't an option. Instead, GM quietly instructed service centers to use a slightly thicker oil during replacements, a move meant to buy time without drawing public attention. No official bulletin mentioned this change. It was communicated verbally through internal channels. By the beginning of the next year, the problem had reached GM's internal review board. A confidential report compiled by engineers from multiple departments listed 47 critical incidents of premature engine failure, including 3 that occurred during routine testing inside GM's own facilities. Each case showed the same damage pattern. Still, the public narrative remained unchanged. Limited and isolated. In press briefings, executives downplayed the reports, emphasizing that customer satisfaction remained strong. But among those who built and tested the engine, frustration turned to despair. They had seen this before, how corporate optimism could bury mechanical truth. "It wasn't one big mistake," said a former GM engineer years later. "It was 1,000 small ones, each justified by a spreadsheet. The warning lights were flashing inside GM." But no one wanted to admit how deep the problem went. What had started as a few broken engines was now becoming something larger. The early tremors of a scandal that would soon shake one of America's biggest automakers to its core. In Pontiac powertrain, morale was collapsing. Senior engineers who had spent their careers under the hood were now forced to sit through meetings dominated by finance officers and marketing strategists. One former team lead described the shift perfectly. It stopped being about metal and combustion. It became about margins and perception. When the first failure reports reached the executive floor, the immediate reaction wasn't to identify the root cause. It was to control the narrative. GM's internal communications department drafted a standardized response for dealers. "We are aware of a small number of isolated incidents related to lubrication systems. Our teams are reviewing these cases to ensure continued customer satisfaction." In reality, the company had already documented dozens of failures across multiple states. Mid-level managers understood what was happening, but lacked the authority to act. Some of them tried to escalate the issue to the board, but the company's own reporting systems made it nearly impossible to bypass the chain of command. Emails from engineers were intercepted by communications liaisons who filtered the language, softening phrases like critical defect to performance variance. It was corporate alchemy, turning panic into paperwork. The company even held an internal workshop on communication discipline, teaching employees how to discuss technical issues without creating legal exposure. Engineers joked bitterly that they were learning how to write apologies before they were allowed to fix problems. Dealerships, meanwhile, became the front line of chaos. GM instructed them to reassure customers, avoid speculation, and follow prescribed diagnostic procedures. But the procedures didn't work because the engines weren't just malfunctioning, they were failing catastrophically. In Houston, one dealer reported 7 dead engines in a single week. Another in Michigan had to rent warehouse space just to store failed units awaiting inspection. Mechanics started sharing pictures of burned bearings and cracked blocks on private Facebook groups, comparing notes on symptoms that the company refused to acknowledge publicly. Word spread fast, especially among truck owners who valued reliability above all else. What began as isolated chatter turned into a movement of frustrated customers documenting their experiences online. The cover-up wasn't a single act, it was a gradual descent. Service bulletins were quietly rewritten, removing references to oil starvation and replacing them with vague phrases like lubrication irregularities under specific conditions. Dealers were told to replace failed engines but not to disclose the cause to customers. GM even created a new internal classification for these incidents, Type 4 performance failures, to keep them off public warranty reports. It was a bureaucratic trick, but it worked. For several months, the crisis stayed contained within the company's walls. Public trust eroded faster than the engines themselves. Dealers struggled to keep up with angry customers demanding answers. Wait times for replacement engines stretched from weeks to months, as GM's parts depots filled with seized motors awaiting teardown. Some dealerships began performing their own oil modifications just to keep trucks running until official repairs arrived. One service manager described it as a war we were never trained to fight. The tension between GM and its dealer network grew toxic. Franchise owners accused the company of sacrificing them to protect corporate image. GM's regional reps, under strict orders, offered only scripted responses and avoided any admission of fault. In the engineering departments, morale hit rock bottom. The once proud powertrain division that had built legendary engines like the LS1 and LT4 now found itself haunted by silence and suspicion. Engineers spoke in whispers, afraid that any open criticism might cost them their jobs. One internal survey reportedly showed that over 60% of the department's staff had low or no confidence in upper management's handling of the crisis. Some veterans took early retirement, unwilling to watch decades of reputation evaporate in a single generation of engines. The lawsuits started piling up. Class action filings in Texas, Michigan, and California accused GM of concealing a known defect and failing to disclose it to customers. Former employees began cooperating with investigators, providing internal memos and test data that contradicted the company's public statements. The media framed it as another chapter in Detroit's long history of corporate denial, a story less about bad engineering and more about bad priorities. What the public didn't see were the human consequences behind the glass walls of GM's headquarters. Inside, engineers who had dedicated years to the project were watching their life's work burn in slow motion. Some described sleepless nights spent replaying decisions they'd made, the design choices, the testing shortcuts, the warnings they hadn't fought harder to defend. One anonymous engineer later told an automotive journalist, "It wasn't the failure that broke us. It was knowing we saw it coming and still did nothing." The fallout went beyond technical failures. It poisoned the company's culture. Meetings became political minefields, promotions were frozen, and new projects were quietly delayed while GM's leadership scrambled to contain the scandal. The powertrain offices in Pontiac, once buzzing with creative energy, turned somber and silent. Engineers avoided eye contact in hallways. Some desks were left empty for months after their occupants resigned. The company tried to reignite morale with internal campaigns about resilience and moving forward, but the damage was already done. The spirit that had once fueled GM's greatest innovations had been replaced by fear and cynicism. By the time GM finally issued a limited service bulletin acknowledging rare instances of lubrication failure under extreme conditions, few believed it. The public saw it for what it was: too little, too late. Sales of Silverado and Tahoe models dropped by more than 30%, and the company's social media pages flooded with comments from furious owners demanding accountability. In the aftermath of the GM V8 crisis, the company found itself standing at a crossroads between denial and reinvention. By the time the scale of the problem could no longer be hidden, the damage had spread far beyond engines and warranties. It had seeped into the company's identity. Inside GM's headquarters, late-night meetings blurred into dawn as executives tried to script a recovery plan that would calm investors, appease regulators, and somehow restore the faith of customers who once swore by the badge. The atmosphere was desperate but eerily familiar. GM had faced recalls and bankruptcies before, but this time the wound wasn't financial. It was moral. The first official step was damage control, disguised as technical refinement. Engineers were ordered to redesign the lubrication system with wider oil passages, a rebalanced crankshaft, and a more robust pump assembly. The fix worked on paper, but production was slow and costly. Each updated engine added nearly $400, 0 cents, to the manufacturing cost, an expense that upper management reluctantly accepted to avoid another catastrophe. At the same time, GM issued a confidential bulletin to dealerships recommending the use of thicker oil in all affected models, even though the owner's manuals remained unchanged. Publicly, the company called this an optimization for extreme operating conditions. But internally, engineers called it what it was: a quiet admission of failure. Sales continued to fall. Silverado and Tahoe dealerships reported a 35% drop in new orders, with many customers switching to Ford or Ram, brands that suddenly marketed themselves as built the old-fashioned way. To lure buyers back, GM offered aggressive discounts, extended warranties, and even cash incentives for owners who agreed to trade in failed vehicles. None of it could fully repair the trust that had been lost. Truck enthusiasts who had once tattooed the Chevy bow tie on their arms now mocked the company online, calling the new V8 the glass heart of Detroit. But amid the chaos, something shifted within GM. A new generation of engineers, many of them disillusioned by what they had witnessed, began pushing for deeper reform. They argued that the company's obsession with cost-cutting and image management had killed the spirit of innovation. A leaked internal memo from one of the engineering directors captured the sentiment perfectly. We must decide whether we are in the business of selling engines or excuses. It was a rare moment of introspection inside a corporation built on denial.